How's it going? Jay Sensational here. Welcome back to the channel. So every time I do one of these decks to play kind of video, it's always been a little bit more geared towards the kind of decks that will aim to progress you on ladder. And this time around, I just wanted to do something a little bit different and just introduce you guys to some really cool new sort of fun decks that also incorporate some of the newer champions as well as some of the newer cards, because I think one thing that came up in a conversation with me and my friends over on the Master and Terror show is that some of the newer champions feel a little bit underwhelming in terms of like power level and like performance. And when it comes to say, what deck should you play on ladder, new champions don't really come up. And I just wanted to take this video to at least maybe change that a little bit and give you guys some cool new decks that feature some of the newer champions and some of the newer cards that are, I think, very interesting and cool conceptually, but maybe might not be as good when you take them onto ladder. So this will be 7 fun new decks to try out, and I've tried my best to feature each of the new champions, but we'll get into that when we get there. But let's just jump into it. Thank you guys for watching. This is Jason Station, and welcome to the video. All right, so starting off, we have an absolute banger right here featuring one of the newest LOR exclusive champions. We have Norra Maokai. This is a very interesting list that is very reminiscent of a deck from the previous season that was Bard Maokai. In a very similar sort of concept, we have this self-toss and kind of like putting portals into our own deck, but portals always go onto the top 4 cards of your deck, right? So what does Maokai Norra do differently? And it's this really cool concept that once you level up Maokai, you leave your opponent with very few cards in your opponent's deck. And that's when you drop this absolute madhouse of a card. We have Eclectic Collection. This card is absolutely crazy. 7 mana burst speed spell for every, read this, for every ally plants a mysterious portal and 3 chimes on top of your deck. But you also plant a flash bomb trap and 3 poison puff caps on random cards in your enemy's deck. So after you flip Maokai, you leave your opponent with 4 cards. You have a board that's 6 wide. You play Eclectic Collection, and then all of a sudden you're putting in 18 puff caps into your opponent's deck. And if they have, like 4, 3, 2 cards even left in their deck, all of a sudden they're drawing, like 4 to 8 puff caps per card. And it's this really funny concept that will not only help you work towards Norra level up. So ideally, you're leveling Maokai and then your Norra is leveled. And then you have this like 1 or 2 solid turns where you're swarming your board with the portals, as well as creating just a load of puff caps in your opponent's deck. Very fun and a cute sort of combo. Norra herself has found a little bit more of a home. There's been like this Norra Nami Shellfolk deck. There's also been some other decks like Norra Elise, but I just want to feature this one because I thought it was the most interesting one, and I did get to play 1 game of this one, and I thought it was really funny. All right, moving on, we have the Jax Vi Timelines. If you have been playing since the expansion, this has probably been one of the better Jax decks out there, and this deck does really rely on concurrent timelines, which has been and proven to be quite good in conjunction with all of the improvised cards such as Fireth, Ionian Hookmaster, Piltover Castaway, and especially Combat Cooks itself. And of course, because all of your units have improvised and can put on weapons, you're able to level up Jax quite well. And the reason why this is so good is because a lot of these cards are quite understated for their cost. So a 2 mana 1/1, a 3 mana 2/1, and a 4 mana 2/2. You can gain some extreme stats off of concurrent timelines. And they also equip a weapon on top of that. So you get to mix and match different keywords as well as stat lines. And this can just provide a lot of pressure against your opponent. This deck is a little bit more one-dimensional because it does very much rely on drawing concurrent timelines. If you don't draw concurrent timelines, this deck performs quite poorly, so it's a little bit more of a give and take as you go. But as far as Jax decks go, I think this one is probably the most successful one. that has seen the most play since the expansion. I think one of the coolest things that has happened to me when I was playing against this deck is Jax's weapon has quick attack, and my opponent equipped Jax with a different weapon that they got on improvise, and then when they played Vi, they gave Vi Jax's weapon to give Vi quick attack. And of course, when you have like 7-4 Vi with quick attack, that's a pretty decent sort of removal tool by itself. So it just plays like a very, very simple for stats on board kind of game plan, and just really aims to like roll your opponent on turns 2 through 4 as long as you have drawn concurrent timelines. But it's, you know, it's a pretty cool deck if you do like this sort of RNG aspect to it, and I think you can get some really ridiculous moments when you are playing it yourself. On to the third deck, we have Zoe Kayn. This is surprisingly where I think Kayn has found the best sort of home with, and I think it's a little bit interesting because I don't know if that's very expected, seeing a Kayn this sort of like in combat needing to strike twice kind of champion paired with Zoe. But overall, I think it makes a decent amount of sense because in this sort of show, you have of quite a few different sort of like alternate win conditions besides Kayn. Kayn himself, I think, can be fairly okay as a champion because he is a sort of scalable sort of removal tool. But he does fall into the fact that if your opponent is able to deal with Kayn, then your game plan sort of falls apart. So anything with like stuns, any like recalls, any freezes, things like that, just really sort of shut Kayn down. And that's where a lot of the other Targon cards come into play. Having Zoe just allows you to play for another alt win condition kind of thing, because you have some of the equip cards and just generally some cards with some decent keywords on there, and some of the improvised ones to give you even more keywords. Being able to level up Zoe can provide a very, very good win con, and either getting like Scout off of the Ranger Knight Defector, getting any sort of improvised keyword from the weapons, getting that Sparklefly elusive lifesteal, or even the Keeper of the Box, the Fearsome lifesteal. There's just a good amount of different keywords out there that I can sort of mix and match. Of course, you have a lot of different cards that also support Kayn as well, having cards like Darkened Lodestone that just help you to grow cards like Kayn, or even Draconic Bands, which is just a very nice equipment for +3/+3 for 4 that just give Kayn that extra bit of attack or health in order to make it a better challenger. And of course, everything that synergizes with Kayn to make him bigger also makes cards like Zoe and Sparklefly a little bit bigger. Not only do we have that, we also have some of the best protection tools in our kit to try to protect Zoe from all sorts of different pings. Momentous Choice being one of the best protection spells in the game right now. Just a 1 for +2 health can be very, very powerful, keeping Zoe alive. And of course, we have Pale Cascade to draw us cards, Heedless Resurrection just to bring Kayn back, and some of the strike spells to help Kayn level. Next up, we have a Master Yi deck. This is one that I ran into on ladder. Master Yi himself has, I think, been one of the more champions that has struggled a little bit more in finding the proper deck. And to be honest, I think right now there really isn't much of one. I know there's some experimentation with Master Yi with something like Viktor, just because it's very easy to proc flow, because you do get a free 0-mana spell every turn. But this is something interesting that conceptually came up to me, and I thought was a really, really cool take on a Master Yi sort of list. So this is Fizz Master Yi that plays for more of this elusive game plan with Master Yi. You can give him a card like Shell Game in order to get him in as like a sort of stat stick. And of course, all these spells and being able to discount the spells do help you towards this Fizz level up game plan as well. So having a little bit of an alternate win con, either just going tall onto Master Yi or going wide with some elusives and pairing them with some buff spells in order to sort of cheese down your opponent. Featuring cards like Sonic Wave for the Master Yi, Flame Sitter for Fizz, and just some fantastic cards overall like Wuju Style as well as Ionian Tailstones, just to drag, stall, and protect your units. Makes this deck pretty decent. And of course, you just chuck a Soul Sword onto Fizz, and all of a sudden you have what is a 5/3 Fizz that can't be targeted by spells in this deck. So a little bit more of that combo aspect, similar vibes to sort of like Fizz Riven archetype in the past prior, but now without having that Papercraft Dragon, this sort of deck improvises in a very interesting way that I thought was something cool to showcase. Next up, we have one of the decks that I have personally wanted to like been itching to play, and when I played against this guy on ladder, I was kind of blown away by this. But this is a Viktor Karma deck. But beyond that, because we have seen, you know, this Viktor Karma or this Lee Sin Karma, kind of like whatever, like Viktor, Lee Sin, just this PNZ Ion deck in the past. But this deck features something super spicy, and that is 3 copies of Back Alley Bar. This is a 6-mana landmark that summons a Back Alley Barkeep, and it says all your new cards cost 1 less. I think this is such a fun and interesting card, especially paired with this deck where you can drop this on turn 6. And I have had games where I've had 2 of these on board, and suddenly my whole deck, or at least any cards that I haven't played before, just have a -2 discount. And if you have a leveled Victor, you get that -1 discount on all created cards as well. And of course, having the Back Alley Barkeeps to create you more random cards, Karma giving you random cards, just this very like sort of funny, but also a actually surprisingly a potent win condition, just helping you cheat out mana. So being able to drop this on turn 6, and all of a sudden your form, if you have 3 banked spell mana, you can play Concussive Palm or Deny for 3 mana, or even Will of Ionia for 3 mana, granted that you haven't played them out before. So it does require a little bit of sequencing if you do need to, you know, have this turn where you need to play Back Alley Barkeep plus a 4-mana spell that make it cost 3. You just can't play the turn prior, so it's still considered a new card. I think this is a deck that I might make a video on because I think it's a really funny one. But it's still, at the end of the day, it's still just this Viktor deck where you kind of want Viktor on turn 4, and then the late game you have Karma with a little bit of burn with cards like Mystic Shot, Get Excited, and just some overall Valley cards or whatever you can generate off of either Karma or the Back Alley Bar. So this is a really fun one that I'm wanting to try out, but we'll see when we get there. Second to last, we have Ashe Thresh. I think the last 2 decks, I forget which of the last 2 decks I picked, but the last 2 decks I think have a little bit higher competitive potency, and this was the deck that I did climb to Masters with this season, just going over 70% win rate over 30 games. This deck aims to utilize Quietus, one of the newest cards that allows you to kill a unit with 2 or less power or destroy a unit's equipment. Most of the times, we're going to ignore the second clause of this card because our deck, with all of its abundance of Frostbites, allows us to put units at 0 power and thus activating Quietus on any unit of our choosing, which makes it just a very, very powerful 2-card sort of removal option. This deck is very, very old as far as things go. This deck has pretty much existed since the start of the game, but has received quite a few buffs and a few new cards as far as things go. And even in this meta, I think it serves a decent spot, being fine into a lot of these more mid-rangey decks like the Timelines decks. I think it also does phenomenally well against Kindred Nasus, just having those freezes and that spot removal with the Quietus overall. And of course, Rhymefang Wolf, one of the cards I think surprised me a little bit by how powerful it is against some of the slower decks, especially paired with a card like Ashe or even Rhyme Touch Shaman, just to set up those really powerful open attacks and threaten your opponent to be reactive first. Of course, this is a top-end Herring kind of deck, so you can pull off some really, really cool combos, either with like a level Thresh or just pulling out multiple Ashes to completely freeze lock your opponent's board. It just makes it a really, really cool and fun deck. Another thing I just really enjoyed is having a time to play Frozen in Fear. This card summons a Rhymefang pack that gains stats for every time that you frostbite an enemy. And if I had had games where I've just played this card out and summoned like a 10-10, 12-12 Rhymefang pack with Overwhelm, and it's all around just a pretty cool deck. So I will maybe make another video on this deck later down the line in the form of Masterclass. But this is a deck that I did make my climb to Masters with. So very, very fun deck, as well as a decent deck to climb with overall. And then for the last deck here, we have a little bit of a throwback to an Akshan Sivir deck, but instead of being in Demacia, we pair it now with Ionia. And the reason why we are doing this is because of the Flurry of Fizz combo. So this works really well with some of the equip cards like Ionian Hookmaster, and of course, being in Ionia, we get access to cards like Momentous Style and Entrancing Lure that just overall just synergize very well with the deck. giving us access to some of the best protection tools as well as some of the better aggressive tools with the improvise sort of keyword. Another really cool thing about improvise in conjunction with Akshan is that you can sort of switch and swap weapons if you have, a bit of spare mana in order to gain additional procs towards Akshan's landmark. So it's a really cool synergy there. And of course, having some really sweet synergy with both momentous choices as well as entrancing lure to not only act as a little bit of extra protection as well as a little bit more interaction, especially utilizing a lot of quick attackers like Sivir, like the Young Witch combos like Akshan, and other buffs out there. Just make this deck a really interesting sort of combination of cards. So if you missed that Flurry the Fist combo that we had, which was maybe even like close to like half a year to a year ago, this deck has seen a little bit of experimentation. I played against it 1 or 2 times in ladder, and I think it's a pretty funny approach at bringing back some of these older combos into the game. But that's going to wrap it up for me. These 7 fun, new, interesting sort of decks to kind of play and check out if you're interested in looking at where some of these newer champions might fit in. And then fair warning, some of these decks might not necessarily be more geared towards climbing on ladder, but if you're looking for a little bit of fun and trying out some of the newer champions or newer decks that the expansion has to offer, I think some of these decks are a pretty good glimpse into what each of the champions and what their package has to offer. But hopefully you guys find something in here that you want to take a spin with. I'll leave all the deck lists down below in the description or in the comments as always. I mean, in the description as always. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll catch you guys later. Peace out, guys, and take care.